Learn English through story. The Mysterious Lover. A dense mist blanketed the cobblestone streets of Ashburn Village as the evening's chill crept through every nook and cranny. The ancient town, with its towering spires and narrow alleyways, held secrets in its every shadow. Among its many legends, one stood out, the tale of a mysterious lover who appeared on nights like this, leaving behind broken hearts and whispers of untold passion. Eleanor Foster, a quiet painter in her late 30s, lived in a modest studio at the edge of the village. She was known for her vivid depictions of emotions on canvas, yet her own life was devoid of the fire she so often painted. Her days were filled with routines: morning walks by the river, afternoons in her studio, and evenings lost in books. On a fog-laden evening, Eleanor found herself inexplicably drawn to the town square. The soft glow of gas lamps illuminated the empty space, their light distorted by the mist. There, beneath the clock tower, stood a man cloaked in an aura of mystery. His tailored coat and sharp features gave him an air of sophistication, yet his eyes held a sadness that tugged at Eleanor's heart. He turned toward her, as though sensing her presence, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. "Good evening," he greeted, his voice as smooth as velvet. Eleanor hesitated, but returned the greeting. "Good evening. I don't believe we've met." He smiled faintly. "No, but perhaps we should have." He extended a gloved hand. "I am Gabriel, a traveler passing through." Something about Gabriel's presence unsettled and intrigued her in equal measure. His words were polite, yet they carried an undercurrent of intimacy, as though he spoke to her soul rather than her ears. Against her better judgment, she accepted his invitation to walk with him through the misty streets. As they strolled, Gabriel shared tales of far-off lands and breathtaking adventures. Eleanor found herself captivated, not just by his stories, but by the way he seemed to understand her unspoken thoughts. He spoke of the beauty of fleeting moments, the agony of longing, and the magic of connections that defied explanation. When they parted that night, Eleanor felt as though she had glimpsed a world far richer than her own. Yet, Gabriel's final words lingered with her. "Some encounters are meant to change us, even if they are not meant to last." Over the weeks that followed, Gabriel appeared in Eleanor's life at the most unexpected moments: at the market, by the river, or outside her studio. Each encounter left her feeling both elated and unsettled. He never stayed long, yet his presence lingered, igniting a fire within her that she could not ignore. Eleanor began to paint with a fervor she had never known. Her canvases came alive with vibrant colors and raw emotion, each stroke echoing the whirlwind Gabriel had unleashed within her. Yet, the more she tried to understand him, the more elusive he became. He shared glimpses of his past: a lost love, a life of wandering, but never the full picture. One night, as they sat by the river under a canopy of stars, Eleanor dared to ask, "Who are you really? Why do you come into my life only to leave again?" Gabriel's expression softened, but his eyes held a sadness she couldn't ignore. "I am a man cursed by time and bound by love," he admitted. "I come and go because I must, not because I wish to." Before Eleanor could press him further, he stood and kissed her hand. "Do not seek to unravel the mystery of me, Eleanor. It is a path that leads only to sorrow." But Eleanor was already too deeply entangled. The more Gabriel tried to keep her at a distance, the more determined she became to uncover the truth. She began asking around the village, searching for clues about his identity. To her surprise, the townsfolk had their own stories of Gabriel: accounts of fleeting encounters, whispered promises, and hearts left aching. Some claimed he was a ghost, wandering in search of his lost love. Others believed he was a man cursed by a jealous rival. Yet, no one could explain how he had remained unchanged for decades, his face and charm as timeless as the stories themselves. Eleanor's obsession with Gabriel began to consume her. She pored over old records, hoping to find evidence of his existence. Her paintings grew darker, reflecting her inner turmoil. Yet, even as she unraveled fragments of his story, the man himself grew more distant, as though sensing her pursuit. One fateful evening, Eleanor found herself drawn to the old manor at the edge of the village, a place rumored to be haunted by the spirits of star-crossed lovers. There in the grand hall, illuminated by moonlight, she found Gabriel, standing before a portrait of a woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to Eleanor herself. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, his voice tinged with sorrow. Eleanor stepped closer, her heart pounding. "Tell me the truth, Gabriel. Who is she, and what do I mean to you?" Gabriel turned to face her, his eyes filled with anguish. "She was my wife centuries ago. You are her mirror, Eleanor, a reflection of the love I lost." Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. "What are you saying?" "I am bound to this existence," he confessed, "forever searching for her soul, which reappears in every lifetime. But each time I find her, fate tears us apart." Eleanor felt the weight of his words, the depth of his pain. Yet, she could not turn away. "What if this time is different? What if we can break the cycle?" Gabriel shook his head. "The curse will not allow it. But know this, Eleanor, you have given me a gift beyond measure. You have reminded me of love's power, even in the face of despair." As dawn broke, Gabriel disappeared, leaving Eleanor with only memories and unanswered questions. But his influence lingered, inspiring her to create her greatest masterpiece, a series of paintings depicting their fleeting love. Years passed, and Eleanor became renowned for her art. Yet she never forgot Gabriel. She lived her life fully, cherishing every moment, even as she carried the ache of his absence. And though she never saw Gabriel again, she often felt his presence in the whisper of the wind, the glow of the moon, and the timeless ache of her heart. For love, she realized, was not about possession or permanence. It was about the moments that left their mark, shaping us in ways we could never forget. The cobbled streets of Ashburn Village were veiled in a thick, silvery mist, as though the town itself were hiding from the world. Eleanor Foster, wrapped in a heavy woolen shawl, walked briskly, the chill of the evening air biting at her cheeks. She had been unable to focus on her painting that day, distracted by a peculiar restlessness. It was this inexplicable feeling that had driven her from her studio to wander aimlessly through the village. Ashburn was a place of whispers and old stories, a town where folklore lived alongside everyday life. People spoke in hushed tones of ghosts and curses, of strange lights in the forest, and of the enigmatic figure known only as the mysterious lover. He was a phantom of legend, said to appear to those burdened by loneliness or longing, offering them fleeting moments of connection before vanishing into the night. Eleanor didn't believe in such tales. She was a practical woman, one who found solace in the tangible world of paints and canvases. Yet, as she crossed the town square, her heart skipped a beat. Beneath the ancient clock tower, its face glowing faintly in the mist, stood a man unlike any she had ever seen. His tall, lean frame was draped in a dark coat, the collar turned up against the cold. He leaned against the iron lamppost, his face partially obscured by shadows, but his presence was magnetic. Eleanor hesitated, her instincts warning her to turn back. But then the man looked up, his piercing eyes meeting hers. They were the kind of eyes that seemed to see straight through to the soul, intense, haunting, and filled with an emotion she couldn't quite name. "Good evening," he said, his voice low and melodic. Eleanor forced herself to reply, "Good evening. It's unusual to see someone out so late." He smiled faintly, a gesture that was both inviting and unsettling. "The night holds its own kind of beauty, don't you think?" Eleanor nodded, unsure of what to say. Something about him felt both familiar and foreign, as though he belonged to a world she couldn't quite grasp. "I'm Gabriel," he said, stepping closer. "And you?" "Eleanor," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "Eleanor," he repeated, as though savoring the sound. A beautiful name for a beautiful soul. She felt her cheeks flush, both flattered and unnerved by his words. Before she could respond, he gestured toward the narrow alleyway leading to the river. "Would you care to walk with me? The mist is thick tonight, but I promise it's worth braving." Something inside her, a mix of curiosity and an inexplicable pull, compelled her to accept. They walked in silence at first, the sound of their footsteps muffled by the damp cobblestones. Gabriel spoke of the river, its waters carrying stories from distant lands, and of the stars, hidden tonight, but ever present above the mist. His words painted vivid pictures, and Eleanor found herself enchanted by his voice, which seemed to hold centuries of wisdom and sorrow. "You speak as if you've lived many lifetimes," she said, half joking. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Perhaps I have." In the days that followed, Eleanor found herself thinking of Gabriel more often than she cared to admit. She would catch herself glancing toward the clock tower during her walks or lingering by the river in hopes of seeing him again. Her paintings, too, began to change. Where once she had painted serene landscapes and still lifes, her canvases now brimmed with fiery colors and stormy skies. When Gabriel reappeared, it was always without warning. He would find her in the market, her studio, or even by her favorite tree in the park. Each time, their conversations grew deeper, delving into topics that Eleanor had never shared with anyone before: her fears, her dreams, her belief that she was destined for something greater than the quiet life she had built for herself. Gabriel, too, opened up, though his revelations were often cryptic. He spoke of a lost love, a woman he had once cherished more than life itself. He described the pain of losing her, the emptiness that had followed, and his endless search for someone that could fill the void. "Do you believe in destiny?" he asked her one evening as they sat by the river. "I don't know," Eleanor admitted. "I think we create our own paths, but sometimes it feels like there's something greater at work." Gabriel smiled faintly. "Perhaps you're right. Or perhaps destiny is a force we can never escape, no matter how hard we try." Eleanor felt a pang of sadness at his words, though she couldn't explain why. Eleanor's growing bond with Gabriel did not go unnoticed. Her closest friend, Margaret, a lively woman with a penchant for gossip, was quick to comment on her newfound distraction. "You've been glowing lately," Margaret teased one afternoon as they sipped tea in Eleanor's studio. "Is there someone special you're not telling me about?" Eleanor hesitated, unsure of how to explain Gabriel. "I've met someone," she admitted finally. Margaret's eyes lit up. "Tell me everything." "He's different," Eleanor said slowly. "He's kind and charming, but there's something about him I can't quite place. It's as though he's carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders." Margaret frowned. "That sounds romantic, but also dangerous. Are you sure you can trust him?" Eleanor wanted to say yes, but the truth was, she wasn't sure. Gabriel had a way of drawing her in, but he also kept her at arm's length, as though afraid to let her get too close. Her unease grew when she began hearing whispers around the village. Others, it seemed, had encountered Gabriel before. An elderly shopkeeper claimed to have met him decades ago, and a young woman spoke of a brief but intense romance that had ended abruptly. Each story was different, yet they all shared one common thread: Gabriel never stayed. After Gabriel's latest visit, Eleanor found herself both invigorated and troubled. She had always considered herself a grounded woman, yet his presence unsettled her deeply. He left a mark on her thoughts, much like the remnants of a dream that lingered long after waking. She could barely concentrate on her art. Every stroke of her brush carried whispers of him: his piercing gaze, his haunting words, the fleeting touch of his hand against hers. Her friends noticed the change in her. Margaret, ever the observant one, grew more vocal about her concerns. "You've been distracted lately, Eleanor," she remarked during their weekly tea at the village cafe. "It's not like you to be so absent." Eleanor attempted a dismissive laugh. "I've just been inspired, that's all. You know how I get when the muse strikes. Is it inspiration? Or is it something or someone else?" Margaret leaned forward, her expression a mix of curiosity and concern. "You've been different ever since that night at the square." Eleanor stiffened, but said nothing. Margaret sighed, reaching across the table to grasp Eleanor's hand. "Just be careful, my dear. This village has seen its share of strange occurrences. If this man Gabriel is it? If he's connected to those old tales." Eleanor withdrew her hand gently, trying to hide her unease. She trusted Margaret, But how could she explain the way Gabriel made her feel? How could she describe the profound connection she felt to him, a connection she herself didn't fully understand? Determined to understand the pull Gabriel had over her, Eleanor began to investigate. She delved into Ashburn's history, searching for anything that might shed light on the man who had entered her life like a phantom. The local library, a dusty and forgotten place, became her refuge. Its shelves were lined with leather-bound tomes chronicling the village's long and peculiar past. Eleanor pored over faded records and yellowed newspapers, her fingers brushing against the brittle edges of time itself. It was there, in an old ledger from the 1800s, that she first saw his name, Gabriel Blackthorne. The entry was brief, noting that he had once been a resident of Ashburn, and that he had mysteriously disappeared after the death of his wife, Celeste Blackthorne. The name sent a chill through Eleanor. Celeste, the woman in the portrait Gabriel had been gazing at so mournfully. Eleanor's heart pounded as she read further. Celeste had died under tragic circumstances and accident, the ledger claimed, though there were whispers of something more sinister. Some believed she had been murdered, others that she had taken her own life. Gabriel had vanished shortly thereafter, leaving behind nothing but questions. Eleanor's pulse quickened as she found another detail. The Blackthorne Manor, long abandoned, lay at the edge of the forest on the outskirts of the village. The following evening, Eleanor couldn't resist the pull of the old manor. The moon hung high, casting a silver glow over the path that led to the crumbling estate. The forest around her was eerily silent, as though it were holding its breath. The manor itself was a shadow of its former grandeur. Ivy crept up, its stone walls and shattered windows stared out like empty eyes. Yet, as Eleanor stepped through the rusted gates, she felt a strange familiarity, as though she had walked this path before. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and decay. Moonlight streamed through the broken roof, illuminating the grand hall. It was there, in the center of the room, that she saw the portrait of Celeste Blackthorne. The resemblance was uncanny. Celeste's features mirrored Eleanor's own, though her expression held a sorrow that seemed to reach out from the canvas. "You shouldn't have come here." Eleanor spun around, her breath catching as she saw Gabriel standing in the doorway. His face was shadowed, his expression unreadable. "I had to," she said, her voice trembling. "I needed to know the truth." Gabriel stepped closer, his presence both comforting and overwhelming. "The truth is a burden, Eleanor, one that you may not wish to bear. Tell me anyway," she demanded, her voice firm despite the fear gnawing at her. Gabriel sighed, his shoulders sagging as though under the weight of centuries. "Celeste was my wife. She was my everything. But our love was not meant to last." He paused, his gaze fixed on the portrait. "We were cursed, Eleanor, bound by love, but doomed to be torn apart in every lifetime. She dies, and I am left to wander, searching for her soul as it reincarnates, hoping that one day, the cycle will break." Eleanor felt her heart constrict. "And you think I'm her?" "I don't think," Gabriel said, turning to face her. "I know." Over the following weeks, Eleanor found herself drawn deeper into Gabriel's world. He explained the curse in fragments, revealing that it had been placed upon them by a jealous rival, a man who had loved Celeste, but could not have her. The curse bound their souls, ensuring that they would find each other in every lifetime, only to lose one another again. Gabriel's pain was evident, but so was his love. He spoke of the centuries he had spent searching for her, the fleeting moments of happiness they had shared, and the agony of losing her over and over again. Eleanor, torn between disbelief and an inexplicable yearning, resolved to help him break the curse. Together, they sought answers in the old texts and legends of the village. They visited the ruins of the chapel where Gabriel and Celeste had been married, and they unearthed tales of the man who had cursed them, a sorcerer named Alaric. Their search led them to a chilling realization. Alaric's spirit still lingered, feeding off their pain. To break the curse, they would have to confront him, and the price might be more than they could bear. Eleanor and Gabriel's love deepened as they prepared for the confrontation. Each moment tinged with both hope and despair. They knew the stakes. If they failed, their love would end in tragedy once more. The climactic battle at the manor, the haunting truths revealed, and the choices they make to break. The cycle would further unfold as the story delves into themes of sacrifice, redemption, and the enduring power of love. Eleanor could not stop thinking about Gabriel's confession. Each moment she spent with him only deepened her understanding of his pain. She had felt love before, a brief romance in her youth, a fleeting infatuation in her 20s, but none of it compared to the pull she felt toward Gabriel. It wasn't just attraction. It was as if her very soul recognized him. The idea that she was the reincarnation of Celeste Blackthorne, woman whose tragic love story spanned centuries, seemed absurd. Yet, as the days passed, the pieces began to fall into place. The painting in the manor, the uncanny resemblance, and the overwhelming familiarity she felt in Gabriel's presence, it all pointed to one inescapable truth. But Eleanor was not Celeste. Not entirely. She had her own identity, her own dreams, her own life. If they were to break the curse, it would be on her terms. She refused to be a passive victim in a cycle of tragedy. "I will help you," she told Gabriel one evening as they walked along the riverbank. The moonlight cast a silver glow on the water, and the mist seemed to dance around them like an ethereal veil. "But not because I'm Celeste. I'm doing this as me." Gabriel's eyes softened, and for the first time, she saw a glimmer of hope in them. "You are braver than anyone I have ever known, Eleanor. But breaking this curse will not be easy. It will demand everything from us." As Gabriel shared more of his story, Eleanor began to piece together the full tragedy of his life. Celeste had been the daughter of a wealthy merchant, her beauty and charm the talk of Ashburn Village. Gabriel, then a young scholar, with little fortune but boundless ambition, had fallen for her the moment he saw her. Their love had been swift and all-consuming, a flame that burned brightly despite the disapproval of Celeste's family. Their happiness, however, had been short-lived. Alaric, a powerful and enigmatic man who had once been a friend to Gabriel, had also fallen in love with Celeste. When she chose Gabriel, Alaric's jealousy turned to hatred. On the night of their wedding, Alaric had confronted them in the old chapel. He had cursed them both, vowing that their love would never endure. Celeste would die, and Gabriel would be forced to wander the earth, forever searching for her soul. Eleanor listened to this tale with a heavy heart, her fingers entwined with Gabriel's as he spoke. "You've carried this burden for so long," she said softly, "but you don't have to carry it alone anymore." Eleanor's search for answers led her to unexpected places and people. Father Rupert, the aging priest who presided over the local church, proved to be a valuable ally. Though skeptical at first, he eventually shared a trove of ancient texts from the church's archives. Among them was a journal written by one of Gabriel's contemporaries, a monk who had witnessed the curse being cast. The curse was fueled by Alaric's grief and envy. Father Rupert explained as he handed the fragile pages to Eleanor. "But such magic cannot exist without consequence. Alaric paid a price, though the journal does not specify what it was." Another unexpected ally emerged in the form of Agatha, an elderly herbalist who lived on the outskirts of the village. Known for her eccentric ways, Agatha claimed to have encountered Gabriel decades earlier. "He came to me, looking exactly as he does now," Agatha said, her voice trembling with age. "He asked for something to break the curse, but I couldn't help him then. The magic that binds him is older and darker than anything I've ever known." Eleanor pressed her for details, but Agatha could offer little more. Still, her words confirmed what Eleanor already suspected. The key to breaking the curse lay not in the present, but in the past. Eleanor and Gabriel's investigation led them to Alaric's former home, a crumbling estate hidden deep within the forest. The villagers avoided the place, calling it cursed ground. But Eleanor felt no fear as she stepped across the threshold. The interior was a labyrinth of decayed splendor, with faded tapestries hanging from the walls, and shards of broken mirrors scattered across the floor. At the center of the estate, They discovered a study filled with dusty books and strange artifacts. It was there that they found Alaric's spellbook, a leather-bound tome filled with intricate symbols and cryptic notations. Gabriel recoiled as he opened it, as though the very pages radiated malice. "This is it," he said, his voice low. "This is how he cursed us." Eleanor scanned the pages, her artist's eye drawn to the elaborate illustrations that accompanied the text. She couldn't read the ancient language, but the images told a story of love, betrayal, and vengeance. "It's not just a curse," she said, her brow furrowing. "It's a binding ritual. He tied your souls together, but he also tied them to himself." Gabriel nodded grimly. "That explains why he hasn't moved on. He's as trapped as we are." As they delved deeper into the spellbook, Eleanor and Gabriel began to piece together a way to break the curse. It would require a confrontation with Alaric's spirit, who lingered in the ruins of the chapel where the curse had been cast. The ritual, however, came with a price. To sever the bond, one of them would have to offer something of immense value, something that could counterbalance the magic of the curse. "What does it mean?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling as she read the final lines of the spell. "It means sacrifice," Gabriel said, his expression unreadable. "Love is the strongest force in the world, Eleanor, but so is loss. One cannot exist without the other." Eleanor's heart ached at the thought. "We've already lost so much. Isn't there another way?" Gabriel shook his head. "This is the only way. But whatever happens, Eleanor, I need you to know that you've given me more than I ever thought possible. Even if we fail, I will cherish the time we've had together." The night of the ritual was stormy, the sky lit with flashes of lightning that illuminated the ruins of the chapel. Eleanor and Gabriel stood at the altar, their hands clasped as they prepared to face Alaric's spirit. The air grew thick with an unnatural chill as Alaric appeared, his form a swirling mass of shadow and light. His voice echoed through the chapel, filled with both anger and sorrow. "You dare to defy me?" he roared. "After all I have suffered, you seek to take her from me again? She was never yours to begin with," Gabriel said, his voice steady. "Your pain does not justify the suffering you've caused." Eleanor stepped forward, her heart pounding. "This ends now, Alaric. You've held on to your hatred for too long. It's time to let go." The ritual was intense, the air crackling with energy as Eleanor and Gabriel recited the incantation they had prepared. Alaric fought against them, his power overwhelming, but Eleanor refused to give in. In the final moments, it became clear that the price of breaking the curse would be Gabriel's immortality. He would become mortal again, free to love, but also vulnerable to the passage of time. "I'm ready," he whispered, his eyes locked on Eleanor's. As the ritual concluded, Alaric's spirit dissolved into the night, his screams fading into silence. Gabriel collapsed into Eleanor's arms, his breath shallow but steady. "It's done," he said, a faint smile on his lips. "We're free." In the aftermath of the ritual, Eleanor and Gabriel began a new chapter of their lives. Gabriel, now mortal, reveled in the simple joys he had been denied for centuries: the warmth of the sun, the taste of freshly baked bread, the feeling of Eleanor's hand in his. "It's not just a curse," she said, her brow furrowing. "It's a binding ritual. He tied your souls together, but he also tied them to himself." Gabriel nodded grimly. "That explains why he hasn't moved on. He's as trapped as we are." As they delved deeper into the spellbook, Eleanor and Gabriel began to piece together a way to break the curse. It would require a confrontation with Alaric's spirit, who lingered in the ruins of the chapel where the curse had been cast. The ritual, however, came with a price. To sever the bond, one of them would have to offer something of immense value, something that could counterbalance the magic of the curse. "What does it mean?" Eleanor asked, her voice trembling as she read the final lines of the spell. "It means sacrifice," Gabriel said, his expression unreadable. "Love is the strongest force in the world, Eleanor, but so is loss. One cannot exist without the other." Eleanor's heart ached at the thought. "We've already lost so much. Isn't there another way?" Gabriel shook his head. "This is the only way. But whatever happens, Eleanor, I need you to know that you've given me more than I ever thought possible. Even if we fail, I will cherish the time we've had together. The night of the ritual was stormy, the sky lit with flashes of lightning that illuminated the ruins of the chapel. Eleanor and Gabriel stood at the altar, their hands clasped as they prepared to face Alaric's spirit. The air grew thick with an unnatural chill as Alaric appeared, his form a swirling mass of shadow and light. His voice echoed through the chapel, filled with both anger and sorrow. "You dare to defy me?" he roared. "After all I have suffered, you seek to take her from me again? She was never yours to begin with," Gabriel said, his voice steady. "Your pain does not justify the suffering you've caused." Eleanor stepped forward, her heart pounding. "This ends now, Alaric. You've held on to your hatred for too long. It's time to let go." The ritual was intense, the air crackling with energy as Eleanor and Gabriel recited the incantation they had prepared. Alaric fought against them, his power overwhelming, but Eleanor refused to give in. In the final moments, it became clear that the price of breaking the curse would be Gabriel's immortality. He would become mortal again, free to love, but also vulnerable to the passage of time. "I'm ready," he whispered, his eyes locked on Eleanor's. As the ritual concluded, Alaric's spirit dissolved into the night, his screams fading into silence. Gabriel collapsed into Eleanor's arms, his breath shallow but steady. "It's done," he said, a faint smile on his lips. "We're free." In the aftermath of the ritual, Eleanor and Gabriel began a new chapter of their lives. Gabriel, now mortal, reveled in the simple joys he had been denied for centuries: the warmth of the sun, the taste of freshly baked bread, the feeling of Eleanor's hand in his. Their love, no longer bound by the curse, grew stronger with each passing day. They knew their time together would be finite, but they embraced every moment, determined to make the most of the life they had been given. For the first time in centuries, Gabriel was at peace, and Eleanor, though forever changed by their journey, found her place in a story that was entirely her own. Eleanor was no stranger to the quiet rhythms of life in Ashburn Village. She woke early each morning, greeted by the sound of sparrows flitting through the birch trees outside her cottage. Her art studio, a sunny room overlooking the village square, became her sanctuary. Here, she painted portraits, landscapes, and the occasional commission piece for her neighbors. Her life had been predictable until Gabriel arrived. Now, the ordinary world around her seemed infused with mystery. Every shadow cast by the lampposts, every whisper of wind through the trees, seemed to carry the weight of the unknown. Margaret, her closest friend, grew increasingly suspicious of Eleanor's secretive behavior. "You've been distracted," Margaret said one afternoon as they strolled through the market. "Don't tell me you're still thinking about that stranger Gabriel, was it?" Eleanor hesitated. Margaret was one of the few people she trusted, but how could she explain the impossible? "He's different," she admitted. Margaret's eyebrows shot up. "Different how?" Eleanor considered her response carefully. "He's kind and thoughtful, but there's something else, something I can't quite put into words." Margaret's expression softened. "Just be careful, Eleanor. You've always had a good heart, and I'd hate to see it broken." Eleanor smiled, but the weight of Margaret's words lingered. As Eleanor spent more time with Gabriel, he began to share vivid recollections of his life with Celeste. "She was unlike anyone I'd ever met," Gabriel said one evening as they sat by the fire in Eleanor's cottage. His voice held a note of reverence. "Celeste had a way of lighting up even the darkest room. She wasn't just beautiful, she was brilliant, spirited, and kind." Eleanor listened intently, her hands clasped in her lap. She could almost see Celeste through Gabriel's words, a woman with striking features and an unshakable will. Gabriel described their courtship in detail. They had met at a winter ball hosted by Celeste's family. Gabriel, then a young scholar struggling to make a name for himself, had been captivated by her the moment he saw her. "I remember the first thing she said to me," Gabriel continued, his lips curving into a wistful smile. "You're not much for dancing, are you?" Eleanor chuckled. "What did you say?" "I told her I preferred books to balls," Gabriel said. She laughed and said, "Perhaps I'll change your mind," and she did. Their love had blossomed despite the disapproval of Celeste's family. who considered Gabriel an unsuitable match. But Celeste had been fearless, defying societal expectations to be with him. "She was everything to me," Gabriel said, his voice breaking slightly. "And losing her, it destroyed me." While Eleanor and Gabriel delved deeper into the mystery of the curse, a new figure arrived in Ashburn Village, Henry Lancaster, a charismatic historian conducting research on local folklore. Henry quickly ingratiated himself with the villagers, charming them with his wit and knowledge. But Eleanor sensed there was more to him than met the eye. "You seem particularly interested in the Blackthorn family," she remarked during one of their conversations. Henry smiled, though his eyes were sharp. "The Blackthorns are central to the history of this village. Wouldn't you agree? Their story is tragic yet fascinating." Eleanor grew wary of his probing questions. Though she didn't fully trust him, she couldn't deny that he seemed to know more about the curse than he let on. As Eleanor and Gabriel pieced together the details of the curse, they began to uncover Alaric's story. Alaric had not always been a villain. Once, he had been a healer, beloved by the villagers for his kindness and skill. But his life had taken a dark turn when he fell in love with Celeste. "He wasn't born evil," Gabriel admitted one evening. "He became consumed by his obsession with her, and when she chose me, he couldn't bear it." Through old journals and letters, Eleanor learned that Alaric had made a pact with a dark force to gain the power needed to cast the curse. But the magic had come at a cost: his humanity. "He was a broken man," Eleanor said, her voice filled with pity. "He let his pain destroy him." Despite the shadow of the curse, Eleanor and Gabriel's connection deepened. Their late-night conversations grew more intimate, and their shared determination to break the curse forged an unbreakable bond. One evening, as they walked through the forest, Gabriel stopped and turned to Eleanor. "You've given me hope, Eleanor," he said softly. "For the first time in centuries, I feel alive." Eleanor's heart swelled. "You've given me something too, Gabriel. You've shown me that love is worth fighting for." In a hidden compartment within Alaric's spellbook, Eleanor and Gabriel found a detailed description of the binding ritual that had cursed them. The ritual required 3 elements. 1. A token of love, symbolizing the bond between the cursed souls. 2. A relic of betrayal, representing the pain that had fueled the curse. 3. A sacrifice of immense value, capable of severing the magical ties. "This is it," Gabriel said, his voice trembling. "This is how we end it." But the final requirement, a sacrifice, left them both uneasy. As Eleanor and Gabriel prepared for the ritual, Henry Lancaster's true motives came to light. He was not merely a historian. He was a descendant of Alaric, determined to reclaim the power his ancestor had lost. "You don't understand what you're meddling with," Henry warned Eleanor during a heated confrontation. "The curse is more than a tragedy, it's a source of unimaginable power. Breaking it would be a waste." Eleanor refused to back down. "This isn't about power, Henry. It's about freeing Gabriel and Celeste from centuries of pain." The final confrontation unfolded on a stormy night at the ruins of the chapel. Eleanor, Gabriel, and Henry faced off as the elements raged around them. Henry attempted to disrupt the ritual, determined to claim the curse's power for himself. But Eleanor, driven by her love for Gabriel, stood her ground. The ritual was completed at great cost. Gabriel willingly offered his immortality as the sacrifice, knowing it was the only way to break the curse. With the curse broken, Gabriel became mortal once more. Though he and Eleanor could now share a normal life, they both knew their time together would be fleeting. As they walked hand in hand through the village, Eleanor whispered, "Even if we only have a few years, it's worth it." Gabriel smiled, his eyes filled with love. "Every moment with you is worth a lifetime." Eleanor's days became a strange duality. The mundane rhythm of village life and the increasingly surreal journey into Gabriel's cursed existence. Each morning, she painted portraits and chatted with neighbors. Each evening, she pored over ancient texts, explored forgotten ruins, and learned more about the enigmatic man who had turned her world upside down. Her encounters with Gabriel gave her a unique perspective on time and loss. She often found herself staring at the small things, clouds shifting across the sky, children laughing in the market, the way light filtered through the leaves, realizing how fleeting and precious they were. Eleanor also grew closer to the villagers, particularly Margaret, who eventually sensed that something monumental was happening in Eleanor's life. Margaret's candid observations became a moral compass for Eleanor, forcing her to question her choices. Gabriel's stories were not just recollections, they became lessons for Eleanor. 1. The price of fear. Gabriel spoke of a time when he and Celeste had considered running away, abandoning their lives in Ashburn Village to escape Alaric's wrath. But Gabriel had hesitated, unwilling to leave his studies and ambitions behind. His fear of the unknown had cost them precious time together. "I've spent centuries regretting the moments I didn't take," Gabriel admitted. "Fear steals more from us than we realize." This resonated deeply with Eleanor, who often found herself paralyzed by doubt. 2. The power of forgiveness. One story that haunted Gabriel was about Celeste forgiving her cruel father on her deathbed. Despite his disapproval and attempts to sabotage her marriage, she had whispered, "I forgive you." With her final breath, "She was stronger than me," Gabriel said. She understood that forgiveness isn't about absolving others, it's about freeing ourselves from hatred. These lessons began to shape Eleanor's decisions, planting seeds of courage and compassion. The deeper Eleanor and Gabriel delved into the curse's origins, the clearer it became that the curse was not just about them, it was about humanity's capacity for love, jealousy, and the choices that define us. Through Alaric's writings, Eleanor uncovered the tragic truth. Alaric had been cursed in turn. His pact with the dark force had bound him to an eternal existence of watching the souls he loves suffer and fail, unable to intervene. His hatred for Gabriel and Celeste had consumed him, but deep down, he was a man longing for redemption. "Hatred is a cage," Eleanor remarked to Gabriel as they studied the ancient texts. Alaric built his own prison the moment he let jealousy rule him. Henry Lancaster's true motives came to light. He believed he could harness the curse's power to achieve immortality. His suave demeanor hid a ruthless ambition that made him a formidable antagonist. Henry revealed that he too was haunted by a family legacy tied to Alaric's pact. "We're all bound by the choices of those who came before us," he said to Eleanor during a tense confrontation. "But some of us choose to rise above it, and others, like you, cling to fairy tale notions of love and sacrifice." Eleanor's resolve only hardened. She saw Henry as a reflection of what Gabriel might have become if he had given into bitterness. Eleanor and Gabriel's connection deepened through shared experiences. He taught her about the constellations, tracing the patterns in the night sky as they sat on the cliffs. She showed him how to paint, laughing as he awkwardly wielded a brush for the first time. "I've spent centuries observing the world, but you've shown me how to truly live in it," Gabriel said one evening. Their love grew quietly, like a tree taking root, and Eleanor found herself torn between fear and hope. Eleanor's journey was as much internal as external. She began as a woman searching for meaning, and found herself confronting the deeper questions of life. 1. What does it mean to love someone unconditionally? Eleanor realized that love was not just passion or connection, it was sacrifice, growth, and the courage to face the unknown. 2. How do we forgive the unforgivable? Alaric's story challenged her to see the humanity in even the darkest souls. 3. What is the value of time? Gabriel's immortality made Eleanor appreciate the fleeting nature of her own life. She resolved to live fully, embracing every moment. The final ritual required Eleanor and Gabriel to confront Alaric's spirit at the ruins of the chapel. The confrontation was not just a battle of magic, but a test of their resolve and humanity. Alaric appeared as a tormented figure, his form flickering between man and shadow. "You think you can undo what I have suffered?" he snarled. "You think your love is stronger than my pain?" Eleanor stepped forward, her voice steady. "Your pain has ruled you for centuries, Alaric. But pain isn't strength, it's a wound. and wounds can heal if you let them. Through the ritual, Eleanor offered Alaric what he had never been able to give himself: forgiveness. Breaking the curse came with a price. Gabriel's immortality was tied to the magic that bound them. To sever the curse, he had to become mortal and risk losing the very love they had fought to preserve. "I've lived lifetimes without you," Gabriel said, his eyes filled with tears. "If I have only one lifetime to spend with you, it will be enough." The ritual succeeded, and the curse was broken. Gabriel fell to his knees, gasping as the weight of centuries lifted from his soul. As Gabriel and Eleanor began their mortal lives together, the story's moral crystallized. 1. The power of forgiveness. Alaric's redemption came not from punishment, but from Eleanor's willingness to forgive. 2. The courage to love. Eleanor and Gabriel's story proved that love requires vulnerability and the willingness to sacrifice. 3. Living fully. Their mortal lives reminded them and the reader that time is precious and must be cherished. Years later, Eleanor and Gabriel stood in the same meadow where they had first met. Their hair was streaked with gray, and their hands were worn with age, but their love had only deepened. "Do you ever wish we could have had more time?" Eleanor asked softly. Gabriel smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "No, because every moment with you has been enough." As they watched the sun set over Ashburn Village, the lesson of their journey lingered in the air. Love transcends time, but it is the courage to live fully and forgive completely that truly sets us free. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you enjoy, then please like and share this video. And don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel.